Hello language lovers, a quick announcement in Spanish. Hola amantes de los idiomas, este video estará en inglés, no olviden activar los subtítulos si no dominan esta lengua. Recuerden que he hecho un video donde explico cómo usarlos. And now, let's begin. There is an aspect related to language difficulty, one that we hardly perceive without paying attention and thinking about it. As I told you in a previous video, I made an estimation of languages difficulty according to the aspects related to their grammar, vocabulary, phonetics, and writing, mainly from the point of view of a Spanish speaker. However, there are other things to take into account. One is resources. Generally, an easy language, but with few resources for learning or practicing it, or few speakers, will be difficult to learn. That is why motivation is fundamental, because if you have motivation to learn a language with few resources, you will look for ways to compensate for their lack of, but it will always be a problem to face. On the contrary, a language with a very high level of difficulty in terms of grammar and vocabulary, but with an abundance of resources for learning and practicing it, and many speakers, its maintenance will be easier in the long run. For this reason, some dead languages, minority languages, or language of which the country where they are spoken does not interact with the international community, will always have this against them. Another important aspect is the subjective opinion about the language and how it is treated. What do I mean by this? There are languages that are not very tolerant of mistakes. By language I mean the speakers of them, whether they are native or not. I have noticed this mainly in certain languages such as French or German, and to a lesser extent English. Although I cannot generalize, I have noticed a trend that is at least worth mentioning. Minimal errors, such as not knowing a word or mispronunciation, are enough to discourage a good opinion of many speakers of these languages. This greatly influences one's self-perception of what has learned, because no matter how many years and high levels and certifications you have obtained, or having lived in places where it is used on a daily basis, one mistake always changes the perspective and is enough to devalue the knowledge and to affirm that you don't know the language. On the contrary, there are other languages where mistakes are tolerated. Here I can mention my native Spanish, but also some languages such as Russian, in which mistakes become secondary and what is valued is communication, or the interest you put into learning it, accepting that there will be always things to learn and improve. While this is undoubtedly very positive in terms of motivation, it can also be a problem if the person is overconfident, even if there is a relatively high level of communication. Language proficiency is still very low. That is why I have noticed that many times they consider Spanish to be an easy language. But I realize that often these people don't speak Spanish at a level that I would consider to be high. And I think that is very much to the fact that there is not a high penalty for errors. But it doesn't mean that they shouldn't take them into account. Another very important aspect is to define how well you know a language. One of the best ways to demonstrate this is through oral skills, or the expression of signs. But it's seldom spoken as a high level of language when you demonstrate a high level of writing, or also passive skills such as reading and listening comprehension. People usually make a judgment in what is most tangible or most immediate, and this can also lead to a misinterpretation of knowing a language. Speaking a language doesn't necessarily mean that you also master the other skills, which can also be considered basic in order to have a complete knowledge of the language. I will explain this particular point in more detail when I talk about what I consider to be a native speaker and the certifications and levels of languages. In conclusion, I would like to say that the difficulty of a language is not only limited to its grammar, vocabulary, morphology, phonetics and writing, but also to the likelihood of being able to learn it thanks to its abundance of resources, both material and human, and often the perception of speakers of other languages, native or not native, can influence your own perception of what level you are at the language. And here it's very important to have self-awareness and consideration as to where you are. Perhaps thinking about whether you really reach a high or low level and another person doesn't agree with it, it's better to think that maybe it's more a subjective opinion with relatively ambiguous standards. It's not the same to have a high basic level or a low high level. Finally, you can judge knowledge or proficiency in a language based solely on one of its skills, such as oral expression in most cases. I can see that a lot in my channel, since there is a misconception that I master all the languages I have used so far. Some of them, yes, mainly the ones to which I dedicate the videos of why I learned them, but many others not necessarily, like the ones in the bonus tracks and those in the second half of the 25 video, since they are at a relatively low level, or simply I use a language close to them to try to approximate an oral production of what it could be like from that language. Look at many of these languages as a kind of pronunciation exercise, and that is necessary to do it, taking into account that I'm not doing it perfectly, but also that it does not mean that you should not make an attempt to express yourself and use that language and learn to get rid of the fear of making many mistakes. Remember that native speakers even make mistakes in their own language, and often they don't even know it. And many times they don't even know deeply their own language. And that does not mean that they are no longer native speakers. And that doesn't mean that they don't have an accent in their own language. Thank you for staying here. Don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe if you haven't done it already. See you next video with another language.